Well, I think because it's so new, I think that, my personal opinion is I think that the administration is kind of dropping the ball a little bit, so to speak, because it seems like, from what I've heard, not too much is going to change, really. There's still this heavy focus on testing. And the reason why, people can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know exactly what this administration is going to do and what they've already put out, but I know that they are not, what they're basically still saying is, this race for the top is still going to be based on the test scores. And that system's not going to change anytime soon. So we're still going to say, now I know that they've hinted at the fact that growth is going to finally get included in the model, which is extremely important because we've all had experiences where, you get a student who's behind and you work relentlessly with that student, or they just kind of get included in your classroom and they're improving, but they still fall short of the benchmark that they have to reach. And so it doesn't count. It has never counted for anything up to this point. So I think that hints at moving in the right direction, but it still seems to be that it's still going to be a system based on a yearly exam for some students and not for others. It's going to focus heavily on English and math and nothing else. And good schools are going to get rewarded, and I think that is a positive thing, but failing schools are still going to probably end up either being pushed towards becoming a charter school. The one thing that I found, and again, someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that President Obama's reaction to the school I think it was in New Jersey, where everyone got fired, including every PE and art teacher and everybody in the building was fired, he said that was probably a good thing. I think if you know the details of that, I looked into the details of that school, it was a very difficult situation to teach in. I'm sure that they were not all doing a horrible job, and to come in with the approach that things need to be wiped clean completely is just the wrong approach. So far, I think that when you hear certain things that are coming out of the Department of Education from Marty Duncan, some of the things he said teachers love to hear, but there's a lot that we're saying, you already know that this is wrong and you're not going to do anything about it. So that's kind of where I look at it.
Yeah, I mean, the reality of what No Child Left Behind has been, at least so far, was wreaked upon my school. 5 years ago, we were restructured. They wiped out the faculty. They got a brand new principal who'd never been a principal, and all brand new teachers who'd never been teachers. And they gave them 3 years to completely fix the situation, which is completely illogical, given that anyone who knows anything about education will tell you that it takes about 3, really up to 5 years to really become a good teacher. And that first-year teachers, as hard as you may be trying, you've certainly not reached your potential as a teacher yet. And so it's really a model that, at this point, the solution to, I mean, they've found the problem, but the solution that this provides is really ineffective. The one good thing that I've seen, or that I've heard about at least, I don't know exactly how it's written into the law, is that they're going to be using national standards.
Yep.
I mean, right now, Maryland, we give a test called the MSA to 3rd through 8th graders, and it's based on standards that Maryland has chosen. It's different than the one that Massachusetts is giving, and so then when they rank the states and their education systems, there's really no veracity to it because the standards are different, the tests are different. You can't really compare it. It's apples and oranges. There's a national, does somebody know what NAEP stands for? National Assessment of Educational Performance?
Yes.
Did I just make that up?
No, that's right.
There's a test called the NAEP, which is given periodically, which is given to kids in all the states.
It's considered the gold standard.
Right, but it's only given to, like, they'll pick a couple schools in each state or in each area. So it's not as good of it's not as good as if you gave it to everybody. But I do think that by having national standards, and that will be an effective tool, at least for research and observation.
But there's a basic lie at the heart of the whole testing business, which came really with No Child Left Behind. It had been there in some states before, but became national. Tests became a norm mandated under that act. But to give you an example of why the test data in virtually every state is a lie, is that in most urban settings, which is where these measurements are used most pertinently and of course affect the largest number of people, between a third and, depending on the school and the neighborhood, a half of the children are here when I test them in 3rd grade are not here when I test them in 5th grade. And the tests have, again, with very few exceptions, not been linked to children. So it's not Emmeline's ex-student who's being tested in 3rd grade, and if he or she is somewhere else in 5th grade, it's tested. So that you're making comparisons between one year and another year, which are utterly invalid. I mean, utterly. They have no validity whatsoever, because they're not comparing the same group of students to the next. So I can give Emmeline an A in her school, because it turns out that all the students turned over, all the bad ones in terms of taking tests, and they're gone, and she's unexpectedly gotten good ones. And it can look like her school improves. Her school hasn't changed at all.
Or
It
like,
may-
Martina was saying earlier, your kids just draw designs in the bubbles.
Yeah, I have a student who likes to, like, we literally give, one of our teachers spent her prep period calculating how many days are missed based on just
Oh.
practice tests, not test prep, but like actually students being assessed on a practice of a previous year's test. And right now in 4th grade, we have missed over 40 days of school if you add up all the hours, because each test is 3 days, 3 separate sessions, and each session, including the extended time, is even more, but each session is 1.5 hours. And then if you do that for math, reading, and science, and you do that multiple times a year, you're missing a lot of opportunity to teach the kids what they would need to know in real life and on the test. So I have a problem with that. And one of the biggest problems I have with testing, I guess this kind of like strays a little bit from your original question, but as a 3rd grade teacher, I had taught for 3 years, 3rd grade, same school, same type of test. The first 2 years, there were fractions on the 3rd grade test. The 3rd year was an election year, and Mayor Bloomberg is the head of schools for New York City, and Mayor Bloomberg was running for re-election. And not only were there was one fraction test, question on the 3rd grade math test, and it was which of these pictures shows 1/2, which I think if you gave to a kindergartner
That's
at
a
our
first grade
school,
standard, yeah.
they could show, they might not be able to tell you what 1/2 means, but like if you show them a picture of a cookie and it has 1/2, like which of these shows 1/2, like a kindergartner or 1st grader could answer that question. So to me, I'm sitting there looking at the test and I'm like, oh my God, it's easier. So yeah, 3rd and 4th grade scores shot up last year. Every school got an A. We got teacher bonus money. They gave us like merit pay because our test scores shot up. This year, they're like extending the amount of time that's going to be on the test. We used to take our test in March. Now we're going to take it in May. So there's like more months of material that we're required to cover. We're already, and they also raised the bar. It used to be that you had to get a 650 to pass. Now you have to get a 700 to pass. So they changed the game. They changed the rules of the game, and your like school's funding is tied to it. You have no control over anything except what you teach to the kids, but they can change. And sometimes, like the election year, I asked what would be necessary to pass. Sometimes, especially in election year, they don't decide what the passing score is until they get all the scores. And if they wanted it to be 700 and they realize not enough kids are going to get a high enough score, they just lower the bar. They just say, okay, 650 is enough to pass. And, all of a sudden,
it's 40%.
Whatever is
40% to
40%.
pass.
Yeah.
I think,
Wow.
so,
Educational policymakers are the worst.
well, a lot of educational policy, all the people I know who want to do educational policy are people who are like, I can't be in the classroom anymore.
That's exactly
I can't do
right.
it. And then those are the people who then look down on you for being a classroom teacher. And I don't want to say I'm doing what you couldn't do.
So don't
Because your
concede.
kids never stop throwing paper balls at each other to learn. So don't tell me that you couldn't do that and then tell me, oh, I read a study about how you need to do your job, so throw out everything you've been doing, which is a constant thing.
There are actually some simple things here, and I don't agree with Nancy that the system is broken, but that's an argument one could have. I would say that the strategies that have been adopted to make better schools comprehensively for all kids is a real issue, but the strategies don't work, and they can't work. They're counter-learning. In every school in Massachusetts, which is where I now work most in public schools, the curriculum has shrunk unbelievably in the last decade. there is no art and music. Forget it, Martine. What do we need this frill for? There's no recess in elementary grades in
There's
many
no
cases.
recess.
Not in Baltimore.
And there are these educational policy people who are all huffed up about kids don't need recess. They're just full of shit.
Kids need that.
Kids do need it.
And there are studies to prove it.
Yeah, absolutely, but they don't look at those studies. They only look at theirs. And there is a way to test which would be enormously valuable to teachers and indicative, and that is what I call student-centered tests that allow you to know that Johnny or Jane has learned X thing about reading, where there is feedback. That is, they're the ones that are in the interest of helping a teacher be more effective with each student in the room. That's not what these tests are. And we have a hugely expensive testing industry now that produces, I would argue, nothing, absolutely nothing of value for education. So there's a political battle here, and I think one of the most complicated things about being a teacher, and maybe each person here would speak about it, is that in many cases, if you're a public school teacher now and you're effective, you may not be drawn into politics, but you're aware of the fact that you need to be. I mean, it's hard enough work as it is. And so for me, the simple issue is, how do we bring more effective teachers into public schools, and how do we support them genuinely? And that question is not the one that's being asked.